screen. And the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much. I'm going to actually go off camera so that I can show the pictures, because that's how I want to tell the story. Only because my internet is not the strongest here. So without me being on camera, it makes it easier. So obviously this is Amarok Society, and what we do is we teach mothers to teach the world. I'll start this story just to refresh your memory of what we do with this little boy here. His name is Fahim, and he's 11 years old. He's a very typical 11-year-old boy. He has this little group of friends. He is bright and friendly and so on. Now, the other thing that makes Fahim typical of 11-year-old children in the world is that he lives in a slum. His slum is in Dhaka, Bangladesh. And the other thing too, unfortunately, is that he does not go to school. And so we'll get into that. He would love to go to school, but he doesn't. So just before we go there, let's take a look at where Bangladesh is. It's right here. It's a country about 1/3 the size of California, if you can imagine how much that is. And it is a country that that distinguishes itself in a lot of different ways. One of the ways is that it is the most densely populated country in the world. So if you can picture 1/3 the size of California, and on that piece of land, you place 175 million people. Now you've got an idea. Bangladesh is actually built upon the largest delta in the world. Bangladesh is also a country filled with wonderful people, but they are, as a country, on the top of the list you do want to be on, the bottom of the list you don't want to be on. And you'll hear about some of those shortly. So here is Fahim's neighborhood. Being a slum, it's not too surprising. This is what it looks like. What you can't get from this photo is the sound. It's unbelievable. Bangladesh is an unbelievably noisy place with calling and yelling and talking and music playing and horns honking. It's just absolutely incredible. Now, the likelihood of a little boy or any little children growing up in this sort of environment, which is chaotic, filthy, noisy, violent, is pretty laughable in terms of being growing up to be a thoughtful, caring adult. That's a pretty laughable thought. Or cryable, actually. How does that possibly happen out of this? Well, we have found a way, and that's what we'll show you. In 2005, actually, my family, so Gem, who some of you have met, and my husband, and our 4 children aged 5 to 18 at the time, all boarded a plane from what was then considered to be the best city in the world in which to live, not what you see in the picture. It was... It was Vancouver, Canada, and we landed in what you see in the picture, what was then considered to be and continues to be ranked as the worst city in the world in which to live, Dhaka, Bangladesh. And I think these sort of pictures rather sum it up. It is really just a remarkable place, and I'll just give you a little sense of it. When we walked out of the airport, the flight over was about, 32 or 33 hours, as we did it on air miles. And the glass doors opened at the end of this long trip. And we were expecting a waft of hot air. What we got was all that and a bunch more. What we actually heard when the doors opened and we stepped out onto the little platform just before the 2-lane pickup drop-off place was yelling and screaming. We saw guards walking around looking very agitated, fully automated rifles over their shoulders and looking very upset, dressed in their fatigues. We saw, we heard horns honking and we saw people on the other side of this 2-lane pickup drop-off was actually a chain-linked fence. And we saw hands coming up from the other side, all the way up to the top, and people yelling. We thought we must have landed in the middle of some sort of a political uprising. But no, we came to find out very soon that it was just a typical day for Bangladesh. And in fact, actually, I guess it was about 3 or 4 weeks into it, there was one extremist party that group that wanted to unseat the government, and they coordinated 500 bombs all over the country to go off within the same 5-minute period of time. And again, while it caused some damage and killed a few people, Bangladesh just goes on. They do chaos well. So here is Fahim, and because how do you make a difference with children growing up in such a ridiculous situation as that? And he now is one of our students, but here are the obstacles facing him without, before we came along. There's obstacles to getting into school. There is actually a school, probably about a 15-minute walk. It's just at the edge of his particular slum. And he could go in and sit down in the hot tin shed there, like room, with about 50 or 60 other children. They would all face a teacher, one single teacher. And school is over within 2 hours. Bangladesh is actually at the top of the list in the world for the shortest number of school day hours per day. Every grade has 2 hours. Now, the teacher there, just like in many developing countries, teaches by rote learning. That means mindless repetition, where you don't actually learn. So UNESCO, the World Authority on Education, tells us that 1 in 3 children is growing up without knowing how to read or write a single sentence. Many of these children actually do this. They go to school. Their parents spring for the extra money needed for some, textbooks and notepads and paper and pencil, that sort of thing. And they come out 3 or 4 years later, not knowing how to read or write a single sentence. That's because not only of the rote learning, but something you probably haven't heard of, which Bangladesh is at the top of the list for, and it's called shadow education. Now, shadow education is when the underpaid teacher hires his or her services out to tutor groups of 20 or 30 children at a time. And those ones who can afford that actually do learn something, but it lets out all of the poor children. And of course, like Fahim, it's rather a moot point anyway for many of them. They have to work to help their family get enough food. So Fahim's job isn't bad. He is an auto mechanic assistant at an auto repair shop. It's more like a shack by the side of the road. And so he spends his days loosening and tightening bolts, helping to change tires and that sort of thing. And it certainly beats the more horrible jobs and sometimes very dangerous jobs of children with no education. This little girl, probably for the rest of her life, will be chopping bricks into composite for construction. This little boy will be a beast of burden in another way with the construction site, just like the man behind him. So our question when we got there really was, how can we make a difference with these children with absolutely no access to learning and turn them into, here are a bunch of children we are teaching. You can see they're holding all their books. And the idea we struck upon was, what if we go in and teach the mothers how to teach children? So in fact, that's what we do. We have 23 schools currently, and inside each school is 25 mothers. Their first lesson is how to hold a pen. And the second lesson is which end goes to paper, because they haven't known these basic things. Every mother then teaches 5 children. That's the deal. They come to the Amarok school, they must teach 5 children. In the beginning, most of them are not too excited about it. By the time a few months has passed, just like Rotarians, they come to understand that actually it's the highlight of their day when they can be of value and be of service to other people. So the good news is that Fahim is one of the children. This is a typical micro school. And some have 5, some have 6, most of them have 5. And it's about 50% boys and girls, sometimes just a few more girls, but we try to keep it about the same. And every single one of these children you see here has come from a long line of illiteracy, you could say. First people in their families to learn how to read anything or write anything. And every one of them will graduate from high school, every one. We have some children who have graduated from college and university. We actually have a practicing doctor. She's a pediatrician and she works in the neighborhood where she grew up. So these mothers are making just a massive change. They're catalysts of change from the family spreading out. And husbands now are appreciating rather than being violently opposed to their wives' education. The husbands are encouraging their daughters to get an education, and really there's all sorts of things that are changing in the neighborhoods, and much of it is from what the mothers themselves are doing, which I'll tell you about in a few minutes, that goes beyond even what we had anticipated. Now, if you look at this photo, it shows 5 mothers, or Amarok mothers at the back, and these are the 25 children that they teach together, 5 children each. Every one of our mothers was married when she was 10, 11, 13, 14, that age group. And every one of them really hated being married at that age. Obviously, a little girl isn't supposed to be married. Bangladesh is at the top of the list, of course, for the highest number of child brides in the world every year. And the number is astounding. So take a guess in your head. Here's the number. The number of little children, girls, I should say, getting married every year in Bangladesh is 4.5 million every year. These little girls here, each one of them will not be married until she's graduated from high school. Our mothers have done something really astounding. They have gone and they have prevented every single child marriage. As soon as they hear about one, they go to the parents and they talk in a very nice way about how it was awful for them. They thought their lives had ended, because basically at this echelon, this social echelon, when the mothers marry, they become servants in their husband's house and do all the grunge work and aren't allowed to, go out or anything like that. It's really almost like being a slave. So they talk to the parents. If the parents are unconvinced, then they let the parents know that they're going to do something. And by the way, this thing that they're about to do, they would never have dreamed possible before they came into the school. And that is that they say that they're going to go and get an officer of the law, and the officer will let them know that it's illegal. And on the very few occasions they actually have had to do that, they've gone into either a police office or a municipal office and they demand that the officer come out with them back to the parents. And in this way, there's not been a single marriage in any one of these neighborhoods. Now, the little boys actually are growing up with something that you might not think about. Not only are they in a much better situation than their fathers, because obviously they have an education, but also they're growing up learning right alongside the little girls and being taught by a mother, by a woman. They do not have any of the constricting, ridiculous views that their fathers grew up with, that girls and women aren't really quite fully human and aren't capable of doing things like learning. Now, one of the things that has really helped to change attitudes, and I mean long-standing attitudes, is dramas. What you can't see here, there's a courtyard near a couple of our schools, and these are high-rise buildings, like only to about 12 stories or so high. But our mothers write and perform dramas of issues of importance to them, whether it's child marriage or gender rights or anything that's really important to them. And they put on a drama, and it's entertaining, but also it really serves a purpose. What you can't see is that on the balconies and out of the windows, people are hanging on to every word. The balconies right now during this performance are crowded with people. So this has really changed attitudes, and I'll give you just an example of what that looks like. So my husband, Gem, was in Bangladesh just before COVID shut everything down. He just left in time on one of the last flights out. And he was approaching one of the neighborhoods where one of our schools is, and he saw a really irate father. And in one hand, the father had a stick, and in the other hand, he had the skinny little arm of his 8-year-old boy. And he was hauling him back home, and he was beating him while he was doing it. Well, what happened in this neighborhood where one of our schools is everybody stopped what they were doing and looked and just stared at him. And he became aware of that, and his hand let go of the stick, and his other hand let go of his son's arm. And he used that hand to come up and pat the son's head. And then he took his little son's hand, and they walked calmly. So that's the power. In a year ago before the school had opened, of course you beat your children. This is what you do. And now it's simply not normal anymore, and it's not condoned anymore. Another way that happens every day is that our mothers are really catalysts of real change, including longstanding attitudes, is they talk to groups of mothers, I should say, in the neighborhood. And they talk about things like maternal health or nutrition or how to budget or women's health issues or whatever. And that's been very powerful. One of the things, actually, it's interesting that they've done is, if you can imagine, during lockdown, and Bangladesh has had several of them, living in a slum, which is bad enough. You've got one room and you might have 6 people living there, with what they have is like a little mat underneath the bed that pulls out, and some people sort of sleep partly under the bed and some people sleep just on the mat that's out. It all depends how big the room is. And you're stuck in there, and there's soldiers outside guarding to make sure you don't get out. Well, obviously, violence increased, right? Of course, in these situations. You add on to that you don't know if you're going to get enough food because your jobs have evaporated due to lockdown. Our mothers have been very successful in educating neighborhood women about how to mitigate violence. A lot of that is just simply how to listen, really listen, and then not react, but instead respond. And that's been very powerful, so they tell us. Here's one of the mothers doing something that many of our mothers and also the micro school children do, and that is they collect money for a newspaper, and then they read it to a whole group of people, which has the lovely effect also of doing exactly what the extremists don't like. And that is that the people in the neighborhood are learning that the rest of the world is not the evil, scary place they thought it was. Other people in the world are a lot like them. So these mothers have really, really made a big difference. And even this photo, these mothers here have been with us for 4 years. And their look of confidence, the way they directly look in at the camera, so transformed, so different from how they were, but also they're pretty proud. And here's some of the reasons they're proud. I'll just very quickly say, a couple of weeks ago, one of the mothers, it came to her attention that this little girl in the undershirt, Banya, was, she woke up, she lives under a tarpaulin with her mother by the side of the railway track, and her mother was gone. It turns out later we found out that her mother had married, like remarried, to have a man in her life. And the husband had said, don't take Banya, I don't want any children. So she spent her day wondering what she should do and crying and asking people if anyone had seen her mother. This little girl, Moon, in the pink, is a micro school child. And she found Banya crying, took her home and fed her, but they didn't have room for her. Literally, they had no room for her to sleep. So she took her to her Amarok mother, who teaches Moon along with 4 other children. And the Amarok mother fell in love with Banya and took her in. And now Banya is going to school alongside Moon, and her life is totally transformed. These sort of stories come in all the time. Our mothers don't let anything pass. So at first, obviously, we did what every responsible charity does, which is make sure that everybody in the neighborhood knows how to wash your hands, 20 seconds of suds and all that stuff. But then with the jobs that had evaporated, what the mothers did is they actually created jobs themselves. And this was well beyond what we had specifically and intentionally taught them. And they actually went around, and they all now had enough money to feed themselves, and they shared the jobs and expanded them for other women too, often. But then what they did is they went and they collected from other slightly better off neighborhoods food, and they opened up what you see here is a midday meal club. We call it a soup kitchen. There are none in Bangladesh. So all of our schools have a rotating midday meal club for the hungriest people, and every one of our schools has a food bank. They've done a remarkable job. In closing, I'll just say that, when you give a child an education, and these children are watching the mothers and emulating them already well before they even graduate, you're giving them the world. So that little Fahim's life and little Banya's life might actually belong to them, not to some randomly selected spouse or garment factory worker or anything else. Now, on the flip side to that, education gives these children right back to the world. And they are actually all growing up. All of our micro school children beyond the age of 8 or 9 are already, all of them, teaching others, giving back, and becoming the thoughtful, responsible adults that we were intending for all along. And this has really been a journey of courage and of love, you could say, of our Amarok mothers. It's obviously not one they can make alone. We have to say we're so grateful for the almost 200 Rotary clubs across North America who have helped us at one time or another, several of them ongoing for a long time, and the many individuals, because the stand that our mothers take is only as strong as the one we take beside them, and they have come a very long way. So with that, I will close. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tanyss. Do we have any questions? We have questions.
We always have questions. So what's the issue with working with local authorities or the government? Because I would see that there would be some issues with folks in town don't like change, and will fight against it even happening. Mm-hmm. So what does that look like?
So when we first started, we sort of kept under the radar for that very reason. Since then, and that was in 2006, our first school. Since then, extremism has grown. And since then, many, many, many men have come to know firsthand that letting their wife get an education is not going to turn her against him. She won't run away. In fact, she'll be a great asset and a bonus to the whole family. But really, what we do is we're very careful to constantly do things that for free for the community. All of our schools have a library of some sort or another that's free. Several of them do sort of daycare activities from time to time and child activities. Our mothers are much revered now, which is a funny thing to say, given that when they went into the school, they were disdained. But they're actually much revered, and if not revered by all, it's like respected for what they're doing. So we've got the community support that way through a lot of the outreach programs that we do.
The 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old girls that are married, what age men are they married to, or boys?
Sometimes it's quite disgusting, and it's like 60-year-olds and older. Very often it's 19-year-olds, 18, but these are like young men and they're little girls, so to us North Americans, it's going to be repulsive, whatever. And sometimes there's boys too, they're only 17 and they get married to a 15-year-old, all prearranged by the adults. They've got this backward dowry system. Is the younger the girl, well, first of all, the girl's family has to pay the groom's family, which is weird. It's opposite for us in our history. And the younger the girl, the cheaper the dowry. So if you get her married when she's 10, it'll be a lot cheaper than if you wait till she's 16.
Wow. So I had a question, and I'm not sure if it was your husband that presented this, but we had a situation where there were these young girls making bricks, right? And it broke my heart, but the girls would essentially try to get pregnant as soon as they were able to. So then they added more people to the family workforce, right? So then they have more folks to help them make bricks to eventually try to get out of poverty, but they never really get out of poverty. So is that when what's that?
No, I'm not familiar with that. What I do, that's awful. And of course, people will do desperate things. What does tend to happen with education, not just with Amarok Society, but with every organization working to educate women and girls, is that the birth rates go way down. This will bring a smile to your face. We actually have mothers who come into our schools and say, me and Jack, the name isn't really Jack, but have decided that we're not going to try for any more. 2 girls is enough. And then they get a big round of applause. So it really does work that way. And I'm not familiar with the other story there.
I had a question about the religious split of the people you're working with. I think Bangladesh is fundamentally Sunni and has a Shiite minority that is repressed, let's say. And I'm wondering, who are the people you're working with? Are they the majority Sunnis or some of them Shiites? And is there a difference, if you are, in how they're treated and your success rate?
The biggest difference is actually between Muslim in Bangladesh and Hindu. There's actually about somewhere between 10 and 15% who are Hindu, and we have gone through periods where they've burned down villages. Just last week, we had to close some of our schools. We're doing it because there's a lockdown. We're allowed to do it very, with small groups of people. But there were murders. People being murdered, Hindu people being murdered, and fires set and that sort of thing. There's that's where the friction is, mainly. The Hindus are really persecuted.
It looks from the head covers as if you're fundamentally working with the Muslims. Is that right?
Almost all Muslim, but we do have
the majority.
They're by far the majority, yeah. And we do have Hindu, and one of the great things, we've got a couple of schools really close together where they've become great friends. One is Muslim community, the other is Hindu, and they've actually become best friends, which before, no talking to each other.
Excellent.
And we've, yeah, oh yeah, and inside the schools, there's often a couple of Hindu women, and there've just been a lot of friction, and basically friction goes, if it's not violent, it's just simply, we don't talk to you. We don't see you as a person. And through our schools, people are starting to just love everybody, you could say.
Good.
Yeah.
So on a large scale, how many schools do you have and how many students do you service?
So we have 23 schools and servicing directly about 6,000 children per year. Every child stays in with our school and doesn't completely transition out to government school for anywhere between 3 and 5 years, depending how fast they learn and their age. And it's up to, we don't ever graduate somebody not ready. So some of them it'll take 5 years. Yeah, I guess, one of the other things I just wanted to say is that all of our micro school children over the age of 8 or 8.5 type thing, every one of them teaches a group of, cousins, often parents and grandparents, and that sort of thing, brothers and sisters. So it really spreads. Now, we don't monitor that. We don't count those, but we see it happening all the time. So it's play school, but serious. And some of our micro school grads who are now in high school or in university actually make a point every weekend of rounding up people in the neighborhood who want to learn how to read and write, and they teach.
Great.
That's university in Bangladesh?
Yes, yeah, university. We actually have one of our children actually got a scholarship to a Canadian university, which came to our attention. She got it, I guess, 2 years ago. So she's still in university here in Canada on the East Coast. We didn't know about that. But almost all of them go to university in Bangladesh. Yeah. If they go to university or college.
You may have covered it. What a great presentation. My question was, when you look at what your goals are, can you go over what your goals are for next year and how can we help and what would you like us to do in terms of getting the word out about the needs?
Well, of course, what a great question. All charities want to hear this, right? And I understand too that fundraising and stuff is such a challenge for Rotary and so on. But really, we would like more people to know about what we do. We do think that we've got just an excellent penny pinching operation where for every child it costs about $50 per year, and they only need to stay on average for 4 years, and after that they get university. I mean, it all comes to them after that. So really just letting people know, because when UNESCO talks about an education crisis, and this crisis is not, we've got problems with not enough people going to high school, and there's this and that and the other in the world, but the biggest crisis is the most vulnerable populations who we're just not reaching. And by the way, there has been almost no progress in the last 15 years lowering that percentage of people down to, you know, so that there's fewer and fewer. It's the numbers are staying high. School does not work for them in the way that you and I think of school.
So how often do you go there, and what's your relationship now with them?
So we go there every year, not since COVID. We actually have, we've got a long-term relationship with one of the clubs where we've completed a global grant, but we have even closer relationship with 3 other clubs. One of them is all women's. It's called Rotary Wheel. Yeah. And which might be an old fashioned thing, but maybe it was from, and these, oh my goodness, these are accomplished women, right? Like they're medical doctors and deans and everything else. And we depend a lot upon our Rotary partners too, to, you know, help to guide if we've got questions or anything like that. But we have a really good relationship with them. And we've done a lot of staff development since COVID through Zoom, which is really working well. And we're also really looking forward to getting back over there again.
Any other questions?
My friend Bill Biden wants to know what you think about lacrosse, the Circle Canada.
What was my question?
Love lacrosse.
I don't think so, Ken. I think we can start with reading and writing.
All right, any more questions at all, other than Ken? No, Tanyss, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you.
It's great to hear about the work that you're doing in. Yeah, I remember, and Gem, I know you're in Canada, but is Gem from, he's from a different country or not? Originally?
No, he's Canadian, but he's spent a long time in California, actually, just for either book tours and Amarok Society. In fact, he's coming out with a new book, but even his he might have had his earlier book, which is our adventures, like the Canadian family, which would be the same as a Californian family living in this situation with our first 2 years. It was pretty wild. It was pretty unbelievable what happened.
What an experience for your children, for sure.
Quite an experience, and we use those books as part of our fundraising, right? Yeah, but quite an experience. Our children still talk to us, happy to say.
That's good. Well, thank you again for joining us. We really appreciate it. And
thank you.
Say hello to Gem. I don't know if he'll remember. Well, I'm sure he'll remember us, actually.
He will. He most certainly will. He does.
And we wish you continued success in the work that you're doing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
so much for
invitation.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
And Art and Gordon, thank you for joining us. You're always welcome. Bill.
Thank you.
I know you're not here because you're packing to go to Hawaii tomorrow, and you know, hopefully Sharon goes even if they don't let you on because they got your birthday wrong.
Good luck, Bill.
Okay, thanks.
Bye-bye.
Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Take care. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Great.